Hello guys, this is What About Nintendo, and today I'm here to talk about why the Tegra X2 could be used in both the Nintendo Switch Pro and the Nintendo Switch Mini. Let's get right on into it. So usually, guys, when people talk about the Switch Pro rumors and Switch Mini rumors, they typically talk about, the Switch Mini probably just using the standard X1 and the Switch Pro using the X2. However, the X2 has multiple advantages that I think would be good for both the Switch Pro and the Switch Mini. Let's start off with the Switch Pro. Obviously, everyone knows that the Tegra X2 is more powerful than the Tegra X1. Obviously, it's the X2, it's the next step up, it's gonna be a better chip. And initially, I was just gonna leave it at that, but looking into the specs, I decided to give you a full rundown and give you kind of what you should expect from the Tegra X2 versus the Tegra X1. Now guys, while I will be getting the technical, I'll try to keep it in a way to where everyone can understand, so don't worry about this just being a bunch of mumbo jumbo. I'm going to have plenty of comparisons that make it easy to just look at the numbers and see exactly how much different it is. First off, in a lot of ways, the Tegra X2 is actually a very similar chip to the Tegra X1, however, it is able to clock itself to much higher clocks safely without producing much more heat or electricity. In fact, it's even more efficient, twice as efficient as the Tegra X1, therefore allowing it to be much more powerful while using essentially the same GPU, just with the Pascal architecture versus the Maxwell architecture. Now the Switch's clocks are actually slightly different than the normal X1 clocks, so I'll be going off the Switch's clocks rather than the X1 clocks because they're not the same. The Switch uses a 768 MHz clock on the GPU when docked, producing 380 gigaflops of GPU power. The Tegra X2 can go up to 1465 MHz to produce 750 gigaflops of power. That's 380 gigaflops versus 750. Theoretically, since the Tegra X2 is twice as efficient, it means using its 1465 MHz should require about the same power draw as the Tegra X1 at only 768 MHz. In fact, it should require a little bit less power. Basic math says that the X2's GPU could be up to around twice as powerful as what is in the current Switch. And that is docked. Let's talk about undocked. As for handheld mode, the situation is of course very similar. Currently on the Switch, the GPU runs at 307 MHz, and since the X2 is twice as efficient, 614 MHz is possible with the same power draw. Theoretically at least. Making the Switch go from just 153 gigaflops in portable mode to 307 gigaflops, which gets it pretty close to the 380 gigaflops or so of the normal Switch's docked mode. Which means with the Tegra X2, portable mode could be almost as high quality as docked mode on the current Switch. It also has over twice the memory bandwidth and RAM as the X1, with a 128-bit bus versus the 64-bit bus in the X1, making max transfer speeds over 58 GB per second versus the 25 GB per second on the X1. It can also use 8 GB of RAM versus the 4 GB on the X1. Basic math then says that the RAM on the X2 is about 4 times better than that of the Switch, and would make the RAM very comparable to what we see in the base Xbox One, which is 8 GB of RAM with transfer speeds up to 68 GB per second, so 10 GB per second more, but not that huge of a difference compared to the 25 GB per second of the current Switch. This is of course minus the 32 megabytes of ESRAM that can do 102 GB per second on the Xbox One. As for the CPU, the X2 uses the same 4-core A57 setup as the X1, but instead of having the 4 extra weaker A53s, which the Switch doesn't even use, and really they're only for very select, extremely low power uses, so they're basically useless for what the Switch wants to do, it has 2 more powerful Denver cores instead. Now when it comes to the CPUs, there's not really a great way to test potential performance off of these specs alone due to the high number of variables, but obviously if they use the 2 Denver cores versus only using the A57s in the Switch, it would be a lot better. However, the Denver cores are very AI focused and not really what I think would benefit most of the Switch Pro. Instead, I think there's a possibility that Nintendo could have them make a custom 8-core version with 8 A57s, which would double the CPU capability of the current Switch. Also note that the Switch's CPU is downclocked to half speeds compared to stock, and with more energy efficient nature of the X2, they could also just remove the Denver cores entirely and clock the CPU back to full, giving a 2x performance increase. Overall, with these advantages, simple math states that the X2 has the potential to be 8 times as powerful as the normal Switch, but of course that doesn't transfer to 8 times the actual performance in most situations, but I would expect around 2 to 3 times the performance of the current Switch. As for how this translates to actual game graphics and performance, I have a video coming soon, so stay tuned for that. Of course, if you're watching, by the time this video has come out, you can probably check it up in the eye if I actually remember to put it up there, hopefully. If not, just check on my YouTube page. Now for the thing that you guys are probably wondering about the most, and that is how it benefits the Switch Mini. Now with that information, some of you may have already realized how the Nintendo Switch Mini could benefit from the Tegra X2 chip. Not from using its extra power, but instead using its more efficient nature to its advantage. As I said, Tegra X2 is twice as power efficient as the Tegra X1, and that is due to its 16nm process versus 20 nanometers. And if you don't know what that means, that's fine. All you need to know is 2 times less power used for the same performance. And as I said before, a lot of parts on the Tegra X2 are actually pretty much the same as the X1, just with a more efficient setup, allowing it to get more power out of it. This makes it very easy, not only for comparisons, but for Nintendo to use this chip and downclock it to necessary specs in order to run with the power needed to match the current Switch while also saving on battery life. This means that the Tegra X2 can produce the same Tegra X1 graphics that are in the current Switch while using around half the power draw simply by lowering the clock speeds from the max 1.4 GHz to the Switch's 307 MHz. According to NVIDIA, the Switch runs at a TDP of 15 watts at 1 GHz on the GPU. With 307 MHz used in portable mode, that'd be about 4.6 watts if you use basic math. A Tegra X2 takes about 7.5 watts at 854 MHz according to NVIDIA, so at 307 MHz that would be about 2.7 watts or so, which does back up NVIDIA's claim that the Tegra X2 is about 2 times as efficient as the X1. So that 2.5 to 6 hour battery life that Nintendo has stated for the Switch could get a theoretical boost up to 5 to 12 hours on a Switch Mini using the X2. However, of course, this is the best case scenario, and I think it's a bit more likely that we'll see 4 to 10 hours. However, that's still a very big upgrade from 2.5 to 6. Now you might be thinking the Switch Mini would probably be used for a lower price Switch, maybe even $200, so maybe using a Tegra X2 could bump up the price a little too much. And that is why I think they would not use a stock X2, but rather a cheaper version of the X2 without a lot of the unnecessary upgrades that it brings with the stock version. I think first off, the Denver cores will be stripped out, will be just left with the same A57 4-core setup that we have on the current Switch. And only 4 GB of RAM will be used compared to the max 8 that we'll probably use for the Switch Pro. And I think it will have the same 25 GB per second bandwidth that is in the current Switch. Given these changes, I doubt that the Tegra X2 would be that much more expensive to manufacture than the X1, especially if Nintendo gives them a good price since they're boosting their mobile market so much. So yeah guys, overall, I think the Tegra X2 is very useful for both the Switch Pro and the Switch Mini, giving the Switch Pro a very nice boost to performance over the normal Tegra X1 in the current Switch, and giving the Switch Mini a very nice boost in battery life over the current Switch since it is a handheld focused device, you're going to want that better battery life on the go. But yeah guys, that's just my opinion. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. Let me know if you think the Tegra X2 will be using the Nintendo Switch Mini and the Nintendo Switch Pro, or you think it might be a different chip. Let me know all that kind of stuff down in the comments below. And if you like this video, please hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and ring that bell icon for notifications of all my videos as they come out. And if you would, please share this video with everyone you know, because it really does help out and spread around my channel, and I really appreciate it. So thank you guys all for watching. I'll see all you guys later on What About Nintendo. Bye.